the webinar so that we can share it to the members and share it out. I'm going to mute everybody as well, just for the sound quality and any background noise. It keeps it better. And at the end, then I'll open up. And if you have any questions, you can hold them till the end for Tanya, or you can put them in the chat box if you want. While you think of them going through the webinar, and we'll pick them up at the end. Tanya's also asked me to say that the slides will be made available you're going to tell us when the slides are going to be made available. So the slides will be available. We don't need to take any notes. And also, very graciously, they're offering a little surprise, is what I'll call it. You're going to give a change style indicator assessment to anybody who comes up with a really good tweet. And you can tweet at KinchLyons, which is KINCHLYONS, during the webinar. And I'm not sure how they're going to decide. Maybe that's Alan's job. He's on the webinar with us as well. So I think that's it. Tanya, I'm going to hand over to you, and feel free to add in anything there I might have missed. So looking forward to the webinar.
Thanks, Siobhan. I think you got everything there. Hello, everybody. You're very welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. It's a beautiful sunny Thursday evening, and the weekend is in clear sight. So we really appreciate you being here with us. Thank you. And thanks, Siobhan, for your lovely introduction. Some of you might know KinchLyons already. We're a firm of business psychologists, and we work with both individual clients and corporate clients across a range of industries. With our clients, we do personal development, leadership development, talent development, team building, organizational performance. There's nothing we can't do. But we use a combination of psychometrics and coaching when we're doing this. We find that the combination works really, really well, because the psychometrics help us they give us an insight and a framework around which we can focus our coaching conversations. And we found that to be really, really powerful. So that's what we're going to look at this evening, is giving an example of a framework that we as coaches can use to focus the coaching conversation. The example we've chosen to look at this evening centers on change, because it's just so relevant for coaches in every field. So for this evening's webinar, first of all, I'd just like to bring you through some of the types of different changes that your client might be experiencing. Then we're going to have a look at a tool that we work with quite a bit. It's called a change style indicator. And this tool can be used to create awareness in your client about themselves, about how they approach change, and also to help you as a coach to gain a better insight into your client and what's going on with them. We'll also consider how this tool can be used as a focus or a framework for your coaching conversations. So again, as I mentioned, it'll help you to create awareness, and it will help with coming up with some questions around change for your client, and help you understand what your client or your coachee values when it comes to change. Okay, as Siobhan has said, if there's any questions as we go through, you can pop them in the chat box, and we can have a talk about them at the end. Okay. So change, for many, if not all of our clients, accepting change is in their personal and professional life can be a difficult proposition. But change is inevitable. It's the only thing that's constant, the only thing we know we're going to face. So whether it's in our personal or professional life, we can all anticipate changes that we're going to have to adjust to. But accepting change isn't a popular idea, and typically we tend to resist it or to oppose it. You know, we're reluctant to step out of our comfort zones because we get attached to our habits, our routines, our lifestyles, and this can make it difficult for us to achieve our goals. So we're going to do a little exercise now just to get our energy levels up and to get us to engage in this concept. So I'm going to ask everybody to stand up. Okay, I can't see you all, but I'm going to put my trust in you that you're going to go along with it and do it. Okay, so we stand up, get up off the couch, put the glass of wine down, shake your arms out, and fold your arms as you usually would, as if you're really bored or waiting for something. Okay, now shake your arms out and fold them again, but this time put the opposite arm on top. Okay. So I'm just interested in, you can sit back down again, by the way, if you want. You don't have to stay standing up. I'm interested in how it felt for you when you were asked to cross your arms the other way. Did it come naturally to you? Did it feel a bit awkward and clumsy? Did you have to stop and think about it? Were you comfortable doing something that was different from what you normally do? That's just a small exercise, but it's really effective in helping us become aware of how familiar certain things can become to us and how awkward it can feel when we're trying something new. Looking at some of the things our clients may be experiencing in their personal lives, I guess change comes in the form of the inevitable, such as aging and loss that we have to deal with. Change also might be something that we choose, but it's still challenging for us. It could be moving house, it could be starting a new job, ending a relationship, becoming a parent, accepting a promotion, emigrating. The list is almost endless. And in our professional lives as well, there have been and continue to be huge changes in how organizations operate, particularly around how we see knowledge and how we use knowledge. And we've moved from the industrial age, where things like land and labor and money and tangible resources were valued and sources of economic capital. And we've come into the knowledge age, where ideas, creativity, knowledge, and how we use that are our main economic priorities. And with this, we've seen new patterns of work, new business practices, and which causes a need for new kinds of workers with new and different skills. We're also moving from hierarchical organizations, where people at the top of the organization have significantly more authority than those lower down, and each person has very clear defined roles. And we're seeing more matrix organizations, where project groups of workers with different skills are created from across the functions of the organization. So these changes are all related to the overall culture of an organization. That's not forgetting about all the day-to-day operational changes that also have a huge impact on our clients and our coachees. Things like new technology, electric driverless vehicles. I heard recently that within the next 10 years, all newly manufactured cars are going to be self-driven. They're making us redundant. Or it could be new work processes, new ways of doing things, transforming customer experience. So many retail and consumer brands are doing this now with things like reward programs, mobile payment options, interactive online experiences. And these are all massive changes, even to the most experienced people within these industries. Mergers and acquisitions also represent change on so many levels for people within an organization, from property to your staff and workforce, to your finances, your machinery and equipment, strategies, policies, everything. Being aware and being ready to move into emerging or expanding markets. Redundancies, a massive change, obviously for those who leave, but also for those who remain within the organization. You know, the people who remain will see a reallocation of work and resources, maybe a loss of friendship, a loss of relationships. Then revision of strategy, so a change of direction for an organization can create a need for an entire change of mindset within the employees. And lastly, then a structural change, so a change in the structure of the organization or the roles that people have within it. Again, all possible sources of change for our clients and our coachees. Just recently, SIOP, the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, they're a division of the APA, the American Psychological Association. At the end of last year, they released a list of what their researchers expect will be the top 10 workplace trends for 2017. And drum roll, number 2 was adapting to change effectively. So this is really reaffirming everything we've just spoken about and just how important change is, particularly in an organizational setting. I know some of you out there will be wondering what number 1 is, so just to satisfy your curiosity, it was performance review. But again, it was really around the change in performance review and how it's moving to you know, small regular reviews from your traditional annual review. So again, that piece of research just really illustrating how important and how topical change is for us at the moment. So we've been talking about change, and when it comes to organizational change, you know, you hear things like change initiatives, managing resistance, reallocating resources. But I guess for us as psychologists and as coaches, what we're interested in really is what's happening at an individual level. You know, how can we help our clients when they're thinking, how do I approach change? How do I behave when experiencing change? Or how do I operate during change? So really what I'm saying here is that for all the changes we've just spoken about, you know, the structural events, such as changes in cultural organizational culture, personal changes such as moving house, or a new technology or new structure within your organization, what we're interested in is the psychological response that's going to go along with this. So it's the process that people go through, that our coachees are going to go through themselves when they're experiencing change. So this really is just the essence of what we're trying to get to here. So what's happening within our coachees when change kicks off? How do they drive change in their own lives? At KinchLyons, we work with positive psychology a lot, which some of you may already know about. Historically speaking, psychology really has been about working with maybe mental deficiencies and disorders with the aim of getting people up to a normal level of functioning. But positive psychology just take things up a notch. It's a scientific study of strengths and virtues and positive attributes that aims to bring people up to an optimal level of functioning. So in this way, positive psychology would challenge the view of people being resistant to change, and rather it will equip people for change by building on their strengths and preferences to help them to function at the best of their ability and to achieve their goals. There's a mountain of research within the field of positive psychology that looks at positive and negative emotion. Barbara Fredrickson is a particularly eminent researcher here. Her work has shown that negative emotion tends to reduce our capacity to be creative, to take risks, to deal with complexity. But then conversely, positive emotion tends to encourage us to think broadly, to be creative, and to try new things. And this is where, as coaches, our appreciative inquiry really comes into play. Applying this to change and looking at a way of viewing change, we can see that if we start off with a negative emotion or a negative view, that's going to impact our behavior and what we do, reduce our capacity to be creative, to take risks, to deal with change, and will in turn affect the outcome or the result that we see. Whereas if we start off with a positive emotion, a positive mindset, a positive view of change and our ability to deal with change, again, that will affect our behavior, what we do, will encourage us to think broadly, to try new things, to be creative, and will again affect the outcome and the result that we see. I don't know the age range of our attendees here, if anybody can remember who this man is. It's Roger Bannister, who in 1954, for the first time ever, broke the 4-minute mile. So up until that, nobody had ever done it, yet within the next 18 months, it was achieved by another 39 runners. It's just a really good example of that positive start, that belief that something can happen, and your view at the outset being able to affect your behavior and what you do and the resulting outcome. So this brings us to the tool that we're going to talk about this evening, the Change Style Indicator. This particular tool was developed by Dr. Chris Musselwhite at the Centre for Creative Leadership. It's an international distributor of leadership development, education, assessments and programs. Last year, it was voted by the Financial Times as one of the top 5 as executive education providers worldwide. The assessment is now distributed by MHS Assessments. They're a Canadian and North American company who distribute psychological assessments. Now, traditionally, their background will be in clinical and educational assessments, which is fantastic because us psychologists are sticklers for statistics and scientific rigor. So we can make for terrible dinner party guests, but it's really good for us in terms of assessments now. Because MHS has a background in clinical and educational psychology, they have a reputation for scientific rigor, for reliability, for validity. So as they move into the field of organizational and talent assessments, these assessments also carry those same traits and are really well respected. So what the change style indicator gives us is information about our coachees' preferred style in approaching change. There are similarities between it and certain personality assessments. There's a lot of research out there around the MBTI and the different types within the MBTI that correspond to results in the change style indicator. If anybody's interested in that, please let me know afterwards, get in touch and we can send it on to you. But really what it's giving us is, as I said, information about our coachees' style and how they approach change, how they deal with change. So the results in the assessment come along a continuum, and it looks at two different elements of change, where one is the rate of change, where at one end of the scale of the continuum are people who are going to prefer change when it's occasional. So baby steps, nothing groundbreaking, just little bits here and there. And at the other end of the scale will be people who prefer constant change, constant upheaval, constantly keeping things moving, challenging the status quo. The second dimension of change it will look at along that continuum is the intensity of change. So where at one end of the continuum, we'll have people who prefer change that is targeted and incremental. So specific small changes where necessary. Then at the other end of the continuum, we'll have people who prefer wholesale, fundamental, groundbreaking, all or nothing change. So when completing the change style indicator, your client or your coachee would answer a few questions, and then the results generated will place them somewhere along this continuum, where there'll be a conserver, a pragmatist, or an originator. Conservers like to accept the structure, or like to accept the status quo. They prefer change that is incremental. Really, they prefer the familiar to the unknown, and their goal would be to preserve the status quo and to better utilize existing resources rather than taking on new things. And they'd also, again, just prefer change that is gradual and slow. Then at the other end of the scale, we have originators who prefer faster and more radical approach to change, who want to challenge the structure and the status quo. Is that the ice cream van in the background of somebody there?
Yeah, that's me actually. I just heard it going up. Actually, I'm just thinking, Tanya, your video is off if you do want to put it on so people can see you. We can see your screen, but we can't see you.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, you're all right. I wouldn't mind if you interrupt.
Anyway, it does, if you can. Down at the bottom, I think, of the page, there's a video button.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to close down my presentation too.
That's okay if you want to
just
continue. Yeah.
No, I'll crack on. I'm on this continuum, Siobhan. I'd be a conservative pragmatist, and as such, my technology skills are not the best. So to avoid any messing, I'll crack on.
Perfect.
So we've just spoken about conservers on one end and our originators on the other end. And in the center, we have pragmatists. Now, pragmatists could be comfortable with both conserver and originator styles, really depending on the circumstances, depending on the context. They tend to prefer change that's functional or context-based, and they're really willing to explore existing structures, but without having any of those preconceived notions that sometimes conservers or originators can have about either preserving the status quo or challenging the status quo. Pragmatists tend to have quite an open mind. Okay. So upon completing the assessment, your coachee will be given a score. They'll be placed somewhere along this continuum. Okay. And it's that score that gives us the insight and the ability to generate a coaching conversation around this. So what can the change style indicator do for us as coaches? So it can create self-awareness within your client, help them to better understand themselves. It can provide insight into their preferred style of initiating and dealing with change. It mightn't be something they've even consciously thought of before. It can create an appreciation for change style diversity. So maybe your coachees will be able to recognize, well, I'm a conserver, but my direct report, I think, is an originator. And maybe that's why we're clashing when it comes to these changes. Or I'm an originator and my husband's a conserver, and that's why we never agree on anything. It also helps you as a coach get to know your coachee and gives you a valuable insight or data point around which to bring a conversation together. It also makes difficult conversations easier by providing evidence. So for your coachees, with other people that they're having conversations around change with, it just takes that personal element out of it and gives them something to base things on. Also, with this insight, your coachee can use their style more intentionally. So within the assessment and within the further detail in the assessment, it has information about the times that certain styles are most suited to. So in what situations is it really, really good to use your conserver style? Or when in other situations might be really, really good to have an originator style. So it allows your coachee to identify their strengths and with their style and to use it in situations where it's most appropriate. Also, you can help your coachee to feel more meaningfully involved in change by tapping into their change preference through your coaching dialogue. So with the results of the assessment, if you can see, wow, this particular client is a really strong conserver, you know, they like really, really slow change, but something huge is happening around them, you can adapt your coaching dialogue to match their style. And so help them really feel involved in it and take ownership of it. Okay, so the change style indicator and it helping us to create questions. Again, we're talking about it being able to create a focus and a framework for our coaching conversations. And it can help us to come up with some really powerful questions. What I have here are just a sample of some of them. If anybody has more, feel free to write them in the chat box there and we can bring them up. As a psychometrician by trade, I'm always interested in scores and what they can tell us about people and how they can help us get to know our coachees better. So one, are you surprised by your score? How does this style impact your performance? What do you value about your preferred style? How does this style work for you? To you, what does change look like when it's successful? What change would you like to amplify? As I said, these are just a selection, but there are so many questions that can come from the results of this assessment and that the assessment can help us to create. The assessment and the results of it can also be really useful if we want to do a values exercise with our clients or our coachees. We as coaches are really interested in values and understanding that when our coachees live according to what they value most, that they're happy and fulfilled. The values here on this slide are all contained within the change style indicator. And these, coupled with your coachees' results, can allow us to have a really enriching conversation about their values and what they value when it comes to change. An initial conversation could be around these values. What does creativity mean to you? How do you honor your sense of adventure? And then another layer, when you have your coachees' results of the assessment, can be, as a conserver, how does that affect your spontaneity? Or as an originator, how do you honor your sense of tradition? So we've seen here that the change style indicator can be used as a really good focus and a framework for our coaching conversations. It can help us create awareness of our client, for them to have awareness of themselves, for us to have a better understanding of them and who they are and how they're going to deal with and approach this change. And for questioning, for helping us come up with questions related to this change that our clients are going through. And also for values, in creating awareness around our clients' values and how they maintain and honor those values when going through change. I hope you found it useful and helpful, and maybe if this is something that you might consider using in the future with your clients. I'd like to thank you all very, very much for listening and for being here on such a sunny evening. As Siobhan mentioned earlier, the slides are available on request. If anybody would like them, you can email info@kinchlyons.ie and we can send you the slides. If you'd like any more detail or information on the change style indicator, we'd be more than happy to give it to you. Please just get in touch. And if anybody hasn't tweeted yet, please do so. Keep the tweets coming in and we'll be sending out our free change style indicator assessment to the best tweet. I don't know if anybody has any questions there that they'd like to pop in the chat panel or ask, and we can have a discussion now if anybody has time to stay on.
I've just unmuted everybody there, so you should be able to.
Super, thanks Siobhan.
Hear everyone.
Is anybody still here?
Yes, yes, we still have 10 on. Tanya, thanks a million. I really enjoyed that actually, and it's interesting, isn't it? Things that are obvious for people. Obviously, you know, change is such a part of life in general. Like life is all about change. There's nothing that happens that doesn't probably, you know, involve change. And people's reluctance, isn't it so interesting? People's reluctance just to be able to deal with and accept change that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's even I keep going on about awareness, but it's creating that awareness around that, because sometimes we don't really even understand why we might be resisting it. We mightn't even fully understand that there's a change occurring. So it's really just to bring that awareness and take the time to acknowledge it and better understand ourselves for it.
And in an organisational context, what do you see are the main challenges on the different styles, I suppose, with people? So, you know, in dealing with change, or are there constants across all three?
Siobhan, do you mean what challenges does each style bring?
Yeah, in an organisational context or in a work context for people.
Well, I guess we're looking at it, just going back to the positive psychology and appreciative inquiry, in that we're really looking at it from the point of view of how can this be a strength for people and how can they best use it within an organisational context.
Yeah.
Sometimes what can be challenging and what the assessment can help with is the different styles' perceptions of each other. You know, that maybe originators might perceive conservers as being stuck in the mud, hindering progress, whereas conservers might perceive originators as not thinking things through properly, being too spontaneous. So that's where challenges can be within an organisational setting, is when people don't have that understanding of the different styles and where their colleagues and their team members are coming from.
So it's great to give a sense of perspective, I suppose, to people in terms of the other people's perspective on change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can sometimes just, take the elephant out of the room. And as I say, it gives people something to work with. And rather than it being personal, in that, like, God, Tanya won't do anything. Tanya will never change and do this. And it's personal and it becomes defensive. Then it becomes that there's an insight there and there's something to talk around, and it starts the conversation. And as I say, yeah, just an understanding of where different people within the organisation are coming from.
Very good. Any questions from anybody else? For Tanya?
It's Mary here. I don't have my video on. I'm just back from a yoga class, so genuinely you don't want to see me.
You're okay, Mary. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Tanya. I was really interested in your reference to the appreciative inquiry, and I had the opportunity or the good fortune to be involved in an exercise many years ago on that, and I found it hugely beneficial. Do you have a particular tool you like to use for appreciative inquiry? In addition to the tool that you did show us, but your own appreciative inquiry tool, do you have one that you particularly like to use?
Not so much a particular tool, Mary. It's more just maybe an approach or something that I would try to bring to each coaching session.
Yeah, just asking questions with a positive spin on it rather
exactly.
than...
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, and another question that I had, and I'll pass it over then to others, is there any correlation between the degree of change and culture? Like, are any particular cultures or even industries more adaptable to change than others in your studies?
Well, there would be a certain tendency for, certainly industries, maybe the tech industries and that, or the design, creative industries, would be, this is a very broad generalization, Mary, now, more open to change and maybe tend to have more originators on the change style indicator within the industry. Whereas maybe something like law or finance, where people need to be more risk averse, would tend to have less change, and be more likely to be more conservers from the change style indicator within those industries. But that is a gross generalization.
Okay, so it's a learned skill, obviously depending on your environment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that your own personality can also bring to it. As I mentioned earlier, there are links between certain personality assessments, particularly the MBTI and the change style indicator. So a bit of nature and nurture there.
Okay, thanks, Tanya.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And it's kind of interesting, I suppose. We've had a webinar already on, team coaching and stuff like that. So I suppose it kind of sits in really well with that in terms of identifying the strengths of your team, on one level, but also identifying, other characteristics like that, how receptive to change and things like that. So I think it probably sits in really well if there are different styles or, different perceptions at play for organizations.
And certainly that was something I was considering talking about this evening as well, is that, again, it's that awareness and understanding, if it's used within a team context, that you just have that insight into where everybody's coming from. And it can open up a whole range of conversations. Again, and Mary, as you mentioned, it could be within your appreciative inquiry style, with different team members asking each other what they value about the different styles. Maybe also what they might find challenging and how they deal with that and how they work together.
Yeah, but it's also kind of like what you're saying, an important piece of the jigsaw then for teams and understanding as they go through change, the different styles, as opposed to even just the strengths of people as well. So yeah, it's very interesting.
So actually that was one of the questions I was just going to ask, was in terms of how you use this in a group setting, but you've just answered it. So it's basically to allow everybody awareness of where each other sits on the continuums, and have the conversation, that open discussion based from that perspective. So that everybody kind of discussing it from that perspective, as opposed to, well, because I know in particularly in smaller organizations where there's been a seismic change, let's say a lot of new staff replacing, let's say a merger or something, and a lot of new staff, but let's say half the organization are still the old staff with it, probably different culture. Yeah. That perception that even change is happening or is happening can be very resistant even to the idea that change is happening. Exactly. Never mind even the fact resistant to change itself. So that's why I suppose you've answered my question in that. Just do the assessment at the start of that conversation and open it from that perspective.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
When we've done it with groups before, Niamh, where we tend to do a type of exercise. So after the results, people are given the results of the assessment, we kind of ask everybody to stand up, and we create a horseshoe shape within the room. So say where in the middle at the top of the horseshoe, you'd have your pragmatists, and then at either end of the horseshoe would be your conservers or your originators. Okay,
so there's a spectrum then.
Yeah, and even just like getting up, getting people moving, standing, and then talking to each other talking to people who are close to them, where their scores are similar, and having a conversation about how they work together, the type of things that they tend to do, and then maybe looking across the spectrum. And often you'll find that there might be, even within a team, there might be people at different stages on the horseshoe, and then people will look across to each other, and then the conversation will open up again between the different styles, how they work well together. They'll often have a lot of anecdotes or instances of things that have happened in the past, or real life work examples of where they've seen the different styles at play.
And do you, in those situations, because there are people who have a tendency to, let's say, not focus on strengths and to not focus on the let's say the positive psychology perspective, but to consistently drag things back to, well, I just don't like it kind of thing, and to shut off. Do you find that open discussion allows for that not to come to the fore? That allows for that to be kind of quiet, where in a smaller setting it can often kind of drag the conversation down a negative, we don't like change, we don't want to do anything, I don't want to listen anymore.
It can happen. I think we found when we're facilitating any event like that, we even try to start from the very minute we do anything, we try to start off with our positive psychology, and we'd always try and take a positive approach to what we're doing, and so that will pass on to the group. And again, as I was saying there, even getting people standing up and getting these anecdotes going it lightens the mood, and humor can be great for that. Even just for getting people into that positive space, that they might see things. And these might be the people that you're talking about who might sometimes bring things down or bring things back to the negative. But just being out of their day-to-day environment, being involved in something, and that kind of sense of humor and the anecdotes and everything going can be really powerful in preventing that.
Yeah, but you don't actively stop that if it's happening, kind of let it happen, but then bring it back in the next intervention or the next question, you bring it back to a positive perspective.
We wouldn't actively stop it. I mean, it might be things that need to come out.
Yeah.
Even if they come out and we can turn it around, fantastic. But we wouldn't stop them coming out. No.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
And Tanya, just something that I don't know if this is helpful or not. It's Mary again, but when we did the appreciative inquiry, we did it in a group of 250 people, and rather than just sending out a questionnaire, with the appreciative questions, we had people pair up. So we had people pair up into pairs, and each person asked the other person the questions and then scribed the answers. Then we collated that and then looked at the data. But what it did was it took away, the manager or the leader asking the question. You were paired up with somebody that, was a good match for you. And it sort of softened the conversation. And it meant that what Niamh was referring to there, where somebody just kind of digging their heels in the ground, it sort of took the edge off that a bit.
Yeah.
I found that very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's similar to Alan. If Alan's still here, he might want to pipe in. Alan, who I work with, sometimes does an exercise when he facilitates called positive gossiping. And again, he'll put people in groups and people will just tell each other something that they really like or something positive about the other person. And as you say, it's not always necessarily feedback that's coming from manager to direct report. You know, there could be any working relationship between the two people. But there's a similarity in what you're saying there, Mary, just about that, you know, the appreciative nature of it, and it just being a different feedback than you're used to getting or you're used to hearing.
Yeah, and just to come in there, it's Alan here. On that is that, just to Niamh's point, it's never really about ignoring the problem, but like appreciative inquiry, positive psychology, just more interested in what we want instead of the problem. And what you'll often find is most conflict is actually miscommunication, or actually a misunderstanding of somebody else's influencing style. And once you can actually understand that, it actually makes it easier to accept their irritating things. So actually, you can see where they're coming from, so it's less irritating. The positive gossiping is very much an appreciative inquiry technique. So we're actually identifying something that's gone well, because really change is happening all the time. But actually, in psychology, we're not worried about change so much. We're worried that people might notice the change happening. And what we're trying to do in positive psychology is to get people to notice the change that they want to amplify, that they find useful, and less noticing the change that I suppose it's not going to be helpful in moving things forward.
Thanks, Alan.
Any other questions before we let you maybe get a small bit of the evening back? Great. Well, listen, Tanya, thanks so much. Just before we go, I just want to let people know our next event is, we have another webinar in May, actually, just for Coaching Week. So we're going to have a lady called Ludmilla, I think it's Igorova is how you pronounce her name. But anyway, she's a member of the, she's on the ICF board. Ailish has met her she met her in Warsaw recently and talked her into doing a webinar for us as well for Coaching Week. So she's going to be talking about core competencies in that week. So that's on Monday the 15th as well. So we have an extra one this month. So Tanya, and the best thing is for people just to contact you directly on your email there if they're looking for if they have any other questions, just to
absolutely. Yeah, info@KinchLyons.ie or Tanya@KinchLyons.ie. We'd love to hear from you. And get in touch if you have any more questions or would like any more information on it at all. And thanks very much, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it.
Very good. And thanks very much, Tanya, for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
You're very welcome.
We'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Okay.
Thanks,
all the best.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.